Lazaris has attributed unnecessary human suffering to a variety of things. Pain as the seed of all suffering, self-pity and self-importance as the source of all negative ego, or of all negativity. Negative ego as the kind of entity that's trying to destroy us, that's always lying, that's always, creating problems, the source of all suffering. And then there are other things, fear, for example, I think guilt. There's a tape, I believe, on ending guilt, and then there's another tape on guilt being beneficial sometimes, but Lazaris has said that guilt is a completely synthetic emotion and has no redeeming value. But the bottom line is there's a pivot away from the more simplistic idea that negative feelings, constricting feelings are bad, to some of them are bad. And that most of them have a destructive and a constructive potential. And Lazaris has talked about the need to end control and domination, and that domination is also the basis of all suffering. That is, we seek to dominate the world in various ways, we become dominated by the world in various ways. And Lazaris referenced Hitler and Mussolini as trying to dominate the world and ended up being dominated by the world. So all of these things, within the paradigm of reality creation, start within. Pain within, guilt within, negative ego within, self-pity within, self-importance within. So basically all negativity starts somewhere inside the human being. And Lazaris has gone so far as to say that the entire universe, all of existence, is functioning perfectly in harmony and da-da-da-da-da. Everything's going great except for human beings, except for the negative ego in human beings, using these various things to create unnecessary suffering. Now, this is to be kind of juxtaposed with other things. For example, Lazaris has said that the physical world is to be seen as a set of weights, that if you're trying to run and win a 100-meter dash, that one of the things that runners do is they put on weights, and then they run the 100-meter dash with the weights, and they get as good as they can, and then they take the weights off, and they can run even faster than they could have if they hadn't trained with the weights on. And so that physical reality could be seen as a much denser form of reality, and thus analogous to putting on weights, and then you're running and trying to do what you can in physical reality. But then he said it might be worth 100 times, 1,000 times. In other words, what you can learn and skills that you can develop in physical existence might be kind of, because they're so much denser, 100,000 times more dense than thought, perhaps, that you can then go, you can do in one lifetime what might take you, much more time to learn and grow in, without physicality. So in that sense, what is a weight? Like, how do you put on a weight with joy? And so if pain is the seed of, all negativity, if the fear of loneliness is the kind of source of all negativity, because that's another beginning of all negativity. Then, how do you use, joy as a weight? In other words, if you come to physicality to put on weights and do training, for example, and so you're doing all of this, weightlifting. How are you going to put on weight with joy and happiness and bliss and just going with the flow? You have to weight up with something heavier, such as constriction, negativity, etc. It would seem, But then Lazaris says that the negativity is lighter than the positivity. So none of that is fully synthesized and explained, and so in some sense it's not terribly valuable, because a faulty map is much more damaging than no map at all. If you're going right and left based on a completely different map than the actual streets that you're traveling, you can be mislaid much worse than if you just stop and ask for directions from people and don't use any map, right? And so it's one of the big ways that we definitely do, waste energy going in the wrong direction is not having an accurate map. Now, so anyway, we have a lot of this stuff up in the air. The other thing that, I was listening to Seth Speaks, and it's relative in the Lazaris context in the sense that Lazaris has stated that Seth is a very valid channel, that Seth may see things a little bit differently, and, Lazaris gives the indication that in their eyes, Seth is not quite as evolved as Lazaris is, which would be consistent with Lazaris saying that they are the most evolved, highest resonance that ever has touched the planet. A not unfamiliar statement amongst spiritual leaders, teachers, presences throughout history, very few of which say that they're, number 57 or something like that. But anyway, that's what Seth said is that, all things are connected. That's scientifically verifiable, meaning that there's absolutely nothing that you can see, hear, taste, know about that doesn't have an innate multidimensional connection with many things. And so, that's, you can follow the thread and connect all things, basically. Anytime you want to do that thought experiment, a pinky nail, a gravity, a rock, you can connect it with all things if you just follow the steps, follow the thread, and one thing connects to everything else. And so, that's certainly so. All things are connected. And, what Seth says about lifetimes is that much like watching a movie or something like that, you might decide that you wanted to experience, for example, life in the slums. You wanted to spend a day in the slums in order to really know what it's like to be in the slums. And Seth says in his analogy, it would be a little bit silly, and this is an analogous to a lifetime. It would be a little bit silly to decide that as a rich person you want to spend a day in the slums. You go into the slums in order to see what it's like, and then you immediately start complaining, why is it smelly? Why is it dirty? Why aren't I being paid $1 million a month to live in these slums? This is outrageous. Well, if the purpose was to spend a day in the slums, That's ridiculous to then complain that the slums are the way the slums are. And so, and then Seth takes it further and he says, well, you're not going to be able to experience the slums the way that someone in the slums experiences them if you have a $5 million mansion to return to. If you're rich and you could just snap a button and the police would actually pay attention to you and your chauffeur would drive up, you're not going to have the same experience in the slums as someone else. So if you want to spend a day in the slums, the best way to do it is to forget the mansion and the wealth and all that, so that you can really experience and taste the slums as kind of the entirety of existence, to zoom into that. That's the best way to get a taste of the slums. And in Seth's paradigm, this would be a useful adventure for the soul, perhaps, for some part of reality to say, I'd like to experience what a day in the slums is like. And if we look at reality as fractal in nature, there is undoubtedly, my wife likes horror movies. Why? I don't like horror movies, but she does. But I enjoy, aspects of Sherlock Holmes. I don't like all the, pumping adrenaline and all that, but I do really enjoy aspects of Sherlock Holmes, and they're not pleasant mysteries. Someone died, someone's being cheated, someone's being bullied. That's not, none of that is pleasant. So solving the problem is curious, but the pain created around the problem creates an urgency, creates an adrenaline, etc., which is captivating. So people of all kinds, growing, evolving, etc., seem to enjoy mystery novels, which is kind of a day in the slums, right? You look at, I want to see what it's like here, and I always enjoy the Jeremy Brett TV series with Sherlock Holmes. It's a BBC production, but I have enjoyed watching those at least once, and some of them twice. And why? Well, it's the opportunity to get immersed in another reality that has a certain amount of adrenaline, a certain amount of curiosity, a certain amount of surprise. There are states of being that are, and a certain amount of familiarity, right? Because it's like I've read these books, I've watched these books, I've lived in England, and so there's familiarity and there's these other things. So these states seem to be appealing. And I could just sit and watch blissed out YouTube music and fractal drawings, but I don't. Meaning I would rather watch an Avengers movie, for example, than just sit and listen to 10 hours of YouTube fractals with blissful music. Why? Well, whatever the reason, there is a statistical reality that human beings are drawn to that. And in a fractal paradigm, you look at patterns repeating themselves at different densities, at different scales, throughout much of reality. We look at that leaf there. That leaf is similar to that leaf, but it's not quite the same. And those leaves are similar to the leaves on the trees, but not quite the same. In fractal patterns, you see the same themes going over and over again. In beautiful music, you find many of the same instruments rising and falling, just in slightly different ways at every moment. It's fractal. There are common deep themes that weave everything together, but everything is slightly different. That's a fractal version of reality. And so, if we look at fractal and kind of lower and higher consciousness, certainly a human being going to a horror movie or whatever is analogous to, a soul or whatever going into a lifetime to experience certain things. And that seems to be Seth's theme. But then, Lazaris kind of counters that a little bit by saying that the conscious moment, the conscious reality right here is the point of power, and that your job is to learn to succeed and learn to have fun. And obviously there seems to be a little bit of a tension, like if you were to enter into a Sherlock Holmes movie and be the one who was murdered, that's not very successful and it's not very fun, right? So, if you enter a lifetime of mystery and murder and betrayal, and it's an entertaining thing for the soul to watch, as the same way as we enter into the fictional narrative of a movie and it's an entertaining thing for the ego to watch, it's not very entertaining for the one being murdered, for the one living in a lifetime in the slum. It's, terrifying, scary, lonely, this, that, the other. And so, Lazaris has talked about editing and changing the script and ending the film and all that, which might be analogous to, the people in the Sherlock Holmes narrative saying, wait a minute, and this actually, takes place in, Moriarty in Star Trek wakes up and says, I don't want to destroy the world. I want to get out of this box. I want to spend time with the love of my life. And so he stops being a crime lord. But what does that mean? That suggests that if I want to watch Sherlock Holmes movie and my characters in Sherlock Holmes keep wandering off to explore fun and success, that I have to keep creating new murdered damsels and, incompetent bobbies and clever detectives to rush in to play their role to entertain me, because I'm not done with their suffering and their conundrums and all of that. And, even Sherlock Holmes, when he fasts for 3 days and pretends to have the fever and all this, so that he can catch a criminal. It's not particularly enjoyable to starve oneself for 3 or 4 days and all that just to, put a human being behind bars. But this is obviously more fun or more engaging in some way for me to watch than, just endless pink balloons going up or whatever it is that would be considered, more fun and successful. Dollar bills or, buffets. The mind is definitely captivated and engaged by adrenaline, etc., which doesn't seem to be produced by pastel landscapes and nothing, meaning nothing that produces adrenaline occurring. So this is kind of a landscape that we have, and I'd like to suggest an alternate view that makes a lot more sense to me. In an evolutionary continuum, you have first of all, it's an endless continuum. And the continuum that's most relevant to human beings is the intelligence continuum. And the intelligence continuum is measured by the efficiency with which time, money, and natural resources are transformed into sustainable well-being. And it's a complex pattern because, for example, after a horror movie, my wife feels better and more engaged. after overcoming some challenge, there's more aliveness and appreciation. After recovering from cancer, there's more value of a day's life, and it's like, wow, I've been taking a lot for granted and stuff like that. So, this white doesn't look so white against a white background, right? So there's a contrast element, and so, even in choosing the backdrop and the setting, it's a kind of a dingy black color, isn't it? It's like, who likes that black color? But I'm looking at the composition, and, it started with choosing this turtleneck, which then I always like the way gold and this type of green-blue look together. So then that chooses this. And then, I didn't want the blue-greens against the the bluish-green irises that I usually have as my main backdrop. And so I wanted something a little bit different. And this, among the images I've downloaded, this one kind of seems, I'm kind of looking at the gold up here with this. So, that all takes place in a few seconds, but look at that ugly black rock, right? But this gold wouldn't look quite so luminous without it, right? And so, there does seem to be, an itch to kind of do something vigorous from time to time, or overcome a problem from time to time. And this white would not look so striking if it were not for the black backdrop. And so that's another consideration. Is the image dark enough to draw on? And of course, you can do it the other way around. For example, I could turn the ink black, and then I could have a much lighter image, right? But contrast seems to be an important part of consciousness, particularly as we refract all thought through language. And all language is contrasting sounds. That's it. And we correlate the contrasting sounds with contrasting patterns. We've correlated. We say this is hand, this is finger. Those are two different sounds. Now, they don't look really too different, do they? This is hand, and this is finger, right? And finger is a part of hand. But those are just sounds. And what we're contrasting is an entire pattern, which is just made up. And then we're contrasting a bit of a pattern, which is just made up. And then we're correlating the made-up sound with the made-up pattern, meaning we could make up many, many different patterns and call them different things, but we're just making this one up. And we're pretending it's distinct when, in fact, it's connected to everything else. So we make up consciousness in this way. Growing up, I remember kind of being worried, right? Like that my self-pity or my martyrhood, because that's the other thing. Martyrhood is even worse than self-pity. Self-pity and self-importance is the source of all negativity, and then martyrhood is even worse. How does that work out, right? This is the source of all negativity, but this is worse. Either way, some anxiety around that. Lazaris has said, control, you cannot control and be loving, you cannot do this. And so, control is you can't control and love at the same time. Or dominate and be in dominion at the same time, or be in your negative ego and this at the same time. One of the things that is, I guess, interesting to me, having been indoctrinated in the Lazaris doctrine, all the tapes and listening to all these in my teens, not leaving my room, much of the time, in 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, just cocooned in there, escaping the family, listening to all these tapes. In many ways, Lazaris was my first introduction to some of the idea, to an idea about something. I had not considered earth energy and earth power before Lazaris's tape on the subject. I mean, it's a valid thing, but neither have I considered Plutonian misogyny. There may be a misogynistic element to plutonium. One of billions upon billions of ideas that never crossed my mind. And so my exposure, what is and isn't negative, I guess it started out with the Christian punishing God of the Old Testament for doing bad things, to what is negativity from Lazaris. But the supposition that my thoughts and my beliefs are creating all of reality, well, there's an idea, and that self-pity is the source of all this, have left me, one, I would say, in a dissociative state in that most of the time, I could not make any correlation between something I had thought and something that was going on. And so it's like saying you're controlling this bus and you press all these buttons and nothing seems to change the downward rolling of the bus. The bus is heading off and, someone needs to control the bus and you press this button and turn this and do this. And there doesn't seem to be a connection between any of these things and the bus rolling on downhill. And so the fact that it's up to me and I'm doing it all, what am I doing? How am I doing it? So there's a source of anxiety. And this relates to a thought about the evolution of the map. Because let's use this in our metaphor. This is reality, and this is complex. I mean, thousands of leaves, everyone slightly different color, a different shape, a different temperature. That's reality. But I can just say those are leaves. Now, that's a dumbed down heuristic model of reality. I can say those are leaves. And it's useful if you know what a leaf is because you speak English. You're using the same map, right? I can say that's a leaf. You can say it's a leaf. I get it. It's useful because we're using the same dumbed down model, and it's taking all the uniqueness out of the leaf into a general concept of something at the end of branches, which is a very crude, dumbed-down model of all the millions of unique branches. Every single branch in the world is unique. And so to call them all branches just because they all grow out of trunks, and every trunk in the world is unique. So we're taking these incredible complex things that are reality, and we're dumbing them down to maps of reality through words, and through words in the English language. Now, the map is not reality. The map is a model of reality. And so when you understand that we're never in reality, we're never looking at reality, we're looking at our map of reality. We're looking at a reflection of reality through our map. Then every map which is not real can be graded in what it reveals of what is real. It's like a mirror. And so, a horticultural major or a a botanist can have a deeper and more nuanced map. This is a folio oculi of a leaf. This is the radial head of the elbow. This is, so as you get into the specialized maps of reality, you just create a lot more distinctions, and in doing so, a lot more consciousness, a lot more awareness, by cutting things up into smaller bits and organizing them more carefully. And so you get a more nuanced map of reality, and in doing so, you create more consciousness. A botanist will look at this and won't just say beautiful maples. They will look at them and say that's this variety of maple and that variety of maple, and this looks like an archaeologist or someone who studies minerals and rocks. They won't just say, look at that black color. They'll say, oh, the oval outer shape of the this and the that. You can go to the dentist and they'll talk endlessly about the little shapes on a tooth. It's got an oval this here and get me a C3 here, and it's like it's over our head because we're not in that specialized world. We get that there's a whole inner landscape of distinctions through an inner landscape of specialized knowledge or specialized language. And those people have learned that map, basically, and so they can navigate with more nuance within that particular segment of reality. Their mirrors are revealing more. And so, anytime Lazaris creates a map of reality, not reality, but a map of reality with language, they're bringing awareness into certain patterns at the expense of other patterns, of course, right? You can't talk about one thing without not talking about all the things you're not talking about in order to talk about the one thing, right? My finger is here, it's not over here, right? And so the singularity of time and space, that if I'm in this place making this video, I'm not drinking orange juice in the living room in the same time space as I'm doing this, right? So I have to make the choice. I'd like some orange juice, but I'd also like to finish this video. So there's a map that I'm using to decide to finish this video rather than get some orange juice. Maps of ideas like efficiency, ideas like habits, ideas that talking about philosophy is more important than orange juice, which is just an idea and not a very good idea, I might add, to the dehydration of my body. It's just the ideas that I've been given to work with by other people, right? Because other people have never, wow, you drank some orange juice, right? No one has ever done that. So it requires a little questioning to say, well, what on earth are you doing sitting in front of this screen when there's orange juice to be drunk? You fool. Often we need another person to have suggested something like this before. It's like, oh, you're right. Babbling away, when there's orange juice to be drunk and da-da-da. How is that an intelligent thing to do? So, that's, these are our maps, right? A map of values and a map of priorities and a map of thoughts and reference points. It's like I enjoy significance more than insignificance, and to a large extent that is determined by the cult. The cult rushes around and says that, looking at my phone and doing all these important things is significant, and drinking orange juice isn't. And so if you want to be significant, you have to fit into certain patterns that the cult is paying attention to. to be considered significant by the cult. And so, is that your significance? And can you go it alone? Decide that something, that money may be important for other people and this and that and the other, but, I'm going to completely create my own map of reality that has nothing to do with anyone else. And is that, is that important? Or not, right? And in what context? Obviously, if you want to survive through being fed by the cult, then the money map might be more important than if you're going to create a rendition of survival through air, which, according to Lazaris is a threshold of belief, but I haven't met any people living on air. So, the thing that I notice is that, for example, in a given environment, self-pity works very well. For example, if you're a child and you are, your dish has been spilled over, your parents' psychology might be such that if you whine, you will give more food without being hit than if you punch your brother who knocked over your dish. So you might try punching your brother and saying, "Stop knocking over my dish," but then your parents lecture you on, "We don't do that kind of thing in this house." But if you say, "Oh," and your mother says, "What is it?" There's no lecture, right? And they say, "Well, Joey knocked over my porridge." And then Joey gets the lecture and you get Joey's porridge. Well, then self-pity, that works very well, right? It's a wonderful path in a dysfunctional, system where you can't, make new bowls of porridge or get rid of bullying brothers with a snap of a finger, despite going into the room of beliefs, all right? And so, so the whining works very well. But, later, when you want some more porridge, if you're 30 years old, what are you crying about? Pour yourself some porridge. That same technique doesn't work very well in a different environment, in a different context. And so, if we look at evolution, I think a good presupposition is that every pattern of identity, every pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being is beneficial in certain places and time. Like, jump to Nazi Germany, you see the Jews being shot, stolen from, etc., and your Jewish neighbor is carted off. You've been on good terms with them, and they have a daughter, right? Anne Frank. So, you don't want Anne to have to, and you pledge to the neighbor, okay, you're going to take care of their daughter. And so you hurry Anne Frank in and say, don't go outside where the German, the Gestapo is, hide in here. So hiding is a technique, right? Lying becomes a technique, right? Any Jews around here? No Jews around here, right? So you have lies. Domination is a technique. The 15-year-old kid of your neighbor comes in and starts looking for Jews, and you say, "Don't you look at my house, young Tommy. I watched you when you were born. Get out of this house, or I'll talk to your parents about disrespecting your elders." Well, you have to see if that works, right? If Tommy shoots a bayonet in you, then it doesn't work. But you're trying to find the thing that's going to work. In this case, domination or whatever. Why? So that you can keep Anne Frank alive. Now, every pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, being is useful, meaning it generates well-being in a given environment. And it causes great problems in other environments. You know, you think of leaping through the trees and gathering bananas. Very useful if you're a monkey. If you're president of the US and you leap through the trees getting bananas, and this is caught on video, generally not so useful if your goal is to be getting elected. Very useful as a chimp. Hang on a minute. So that's something. I don't think there's anyone that can demonstrate that every pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being has been useful in some context for something, for someone, or it doesn't exist. May have only been useful as a sense of an experiment. I want to learn, well, that doesn't work very well. So you could look at behavior or identity, patterns of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, as a continuum of success and fun in a given environment. Now, going from being beaten up daily by the bully to landing a good punch and not being beaten up again, very useful. Going from a nice meditation retreat to punching someone in the nose and not being allowed to continue the meditation retreat or come back to the group, not so useful, right? It's a contextual thing, and so the challenge for the ego is to find the most intelligent pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that facilitates the sustainable realization of human needs the most effectively. And, I'll share an area where I find self-pity to be useful. I find it incredibly irritating how much my wife tunes out about what I'm saying. And talking about that just escalates the irritation because then she tunes that out as well. And so I talk to my dog instead. Now, a very interesting thing happens. Suddenly, my wife, who can't hear anything, hears what I'm saying to the dog perfectly. And so I complain to the dog. And what happens is my tension dissipates. I always enjoy interacting with my dog more than almost any other, physical being. So I'm getting to play with my dog. There's an imaginative, creative element. And I'm playing the kind of poor me story, and it results in affection and attention and improvement in the irritating behavior of my wife. It's the best thing that I found. I started out with, I have something to share. My wife's gone immediately, right? Why are you doing this and this? No answer. Irritating, right? Try the whole gamut of different things. And what works is to speak indirectly to my dog about my wife, and it works. I feel better. The dog loves it because he just enjoys attention and playing. I laugh, my wife laughs, and she stops doing the irritating thing I talk to the dog about her doing. And there's definitely a persona of victimhood. I'll say something like, Philip, did you see that? You see what she's doing? I asked for this, she didn't do this, but then when I did this, she did that. You see how unfair that is? So this produces a laugh. And, and I'm playing this, the self-pity thing, and it works. So I do it. It's a new technique, meaning no other woman in, many women I've dated responded well to that. Another woman responded well to apologies for her mistakes. She loved it, right? She's so happy if I apologized for her mistakes. I got tired of that, so that was the end of of that relationship. Other people respond to this and this and this, the other. But in a given environment, a given pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, and being works. Now, I learned this with business as well, and it was quite confusing and irritating. I would play with my clients' children and be interested in how they were fitting in and dealing with their family and all that. And clients would fire me, or they would pay me less money, they would treat me less respectfully. And I realized it was the chauvinism of my clients, that if I was a serious contractor professional, I would be interested in money and things and being efficient and keeping things done. And this was the stereotype of my cult. And so if I wanted to be respected and praised and sir and all this stuff and paid lots of money, I had to be in that mold. I learned the same thing with my mother, only I had to be a foolish rascal to get affection from my mother. I had to be a clown to not upset my teacher and do this. I had to, in each environment, there were different things that were rewarded. And now Lazaris would say that all of these have to do with my beliefs. I've never noticed that. I'm sure there's an element that you can see it that way, because you can see almost anything if you look through a certain way. I just notice I don't like fighting. I don't like this. I don't like this. And if I'm going to get reasonable things to happen without being abused, there are certain ways that I'm asked to relate by the people around me. And they're very different. It's and I haven't found the belief thing to be a very useful technology, because it doesn't account for, are you saying that because I got tired of apologizing for Claire's mistakes, suddenly I changed all my beliefs and now I'm being, a victim with my wife, or, other people put me on pedestals? That's annoying. Oh, you're such a genius. This isn't. No. Let's get rid of that. I don't want that. I mean, I can pick different contexts. It's so nice to be in Thailand, for example, and because people smile. And if I was making this video for Thai people, it would be so much happier, nicer video, because in that environment, smiling and presence is actually honored. And so I smile more, because everyone likes to be visible. Particularly, that's a core pain of mine, how often I've been asked not to be seen to accommodate the comfort zone of other people. If you would just disappear and then don't point out that we've asked you to disappear, and then don't point out that it's miserable to be asked to be invisible. Please don't point that out either. If you could bury that as well. So now we're 3 levels deep in the burial of authentic presence. And then, because we don't want to feel guilty that we've asked you to bury 3 layers of your authenticity, could you tell us how wonderful we are and how much you enjoy being buried 3 layers deep? Okay, and then that's a little bit intense and stuff, so just be a little more playful, do that. Okay, you've got it. So just do that and never be real, and we'll be delighted and welcome to the table, right? So, that being a prerequisite for, not being punched in the face as a kid, starting with my parents, invisibility feels horrible. Could you just pretend that none of this is happening, and then pretend that you don't have any feelings about having to pretend that, and then pretend that that's wonderful, and then tone it down a bit because it's too intense, all your pretending. Then we'd love to have you around. This is such a miserable, sliced up form of torture for someone that actually wants to exist, that, I'm much, I'm more fed up with those types of arrangements, even if they're pleasant, than I am with, being angry and having someone actually hear it or see it. So, I'm not sure. Well, I've never found a useful impact to going into the room of beliefs and changing any of that. It hasn't changed any of the people's behavior around me. The one thing I can do is take myself into different groups where I'm seen, and every group values a different thing. As I say, in the West, ideas, articulating talent, and seriousness are elevated. I would say that 90% of the praise I've received in Western countries have been along those lines. So basically, to exist, I have to be more like the person in this video. It's not a lot of fun, but I'm not lying. I'm putting on a more serious persona, and I did that with clients. I worked out it was a 30% hit, that if I wanted to make 30% more money and be valued 30% more, I would be serious, focus on efficiency, focus on things. The masculine, chauvinistic contractor stereotype works every time. So basically, I'll get $100,000 rather than $70,000 if I'll play that game. Do I want the extra 30 grand? Basically, it's a coping strategy. It's not a very intelligent one. Let's all agree that this is what a contractor does, and the contractor doesn't play with kids and all this stuff. Well, that seems to be the setup. Now, my response to that, since I don't enjoy that role as much as I enjoy playing with kids and helping families, etc., is to save up and invest enough money that I can go other places in other cultures where I'm rewarded. I mean, I don't work on my beliefs. I work on investing and going to places like Thailand where I'm greatly praised and not feared for playing with children. As an American male, I have 10 seconds to play with an American child on average, like in a park or something, before I am a pedophile and terrifying these parents that have been programmed to fear strangers, the unknown, men, blah, blah, blah. Sex, so we've a cult, dynamic going on there. And I can go over to Thailand and can play all I want with kids, with great approval and warm delight of the kids and the parents, and so I go to Thailand, right? So, but that's a coping strategy. It's not a brilliant one, Stop all work, close down income, get on a plane and fly 18 hours, land in a different culture, and play with children. It works. I mean, I'm not going to pretend it's highly efficient. It's just 10 times more efficient than trying to have similar interactions with U.S. children. So I do it because I care about that. Now I complain about it as well. Why am I automatically a criminal because I'm male? Why am I automatically a pedophile because I'm male? Why is affection automatically suspect because I'm an American? I mean, all of these things, they don't make a lot of sense. They're pretty dumb. They're going on all around me, and I don't like it. And I can pretend this is a wonderful advanced culture. No, it seems pretty primitive. I could say, well, that's a negative attitude, and I'm creating my reality with my attitude. Well, it's a useful observation if I want to spend time in a more intelligent culture, such as Thailand, where there is less energy consumed for a higher quality of presence and being a lot of the time. That seems far more interesting, and so it's okay, so let's do that. Now, they have their own problems over there, stupidities, Oh, your skin is so white. Your skin is so nice and tanned. It's you have all kinds of stupidities all around. But these are learned stupidities. They're learned patterns. They're also learned intelligences. They're just patterns of energy, thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. Now, if you grow up in a cult where the whiter your skin, the better you are treated, it makes sense that they're skin racist, right? If I grow up in a cult where the more serious and predictable and organized, and the more money I make, the more I'm respected, but I don't actually enjoy doing those things, then it makes sense that I'm doing them, but it also makes sense that I'm not happy about that. And so the lens I would generally say is that evolution is the process of turning one pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being into a more intelligent pattern for a given environment. And that there's a hierarchy. That if saying, oh yes, I'm harboring Jews gets you shot, there isn't a lot of room for your empathy when you're dead. So are you at a point when you're really ready to go and make a stand? Is that a martyred activity? I mean, all these labels, this is the source of all negativity, that it's really, what's the pattern that of all the patterns I've tried, that delivers the highest level of sustainable well-being overall in the areas of well-being that I'm interested in? And let's do that. And then let's try and make that pattern more intelligent, i.e. consume less energy, have more well-being. The pattern of talking to my dog wasn't my first effort. I had many one-hour conversations that went nowhere and left me feeling worse than when I began, given that, my wife's most effective pattern to survive suicide when she was 8 was to just shut down. There were no allies. And so, someone had something to complain about, she shuts down. She doesn't shut down when I'm talking about poor me to the dog. She laughs and engages. So that's what works for her. So if I can in 3 minutes accomplish what I can't do in an hour of philosophical debate, or pointing out this and this and this, and what are you going to do about that? Now you still haven't responded to that, and now you haven't responded to that. Yeah. And also talking to, with Lazaris about payoffs doesn't work in the slightest. What helped was reading Bessel van der Kolk's book on trauma. Thankfully, I had read the book before I met my wife, because I do not know of a single woman on the planet that supports my sustainable well-being as well as she does. Out of 100 lovers, including Lazaris friends, someone who shuts down in this, the best relationship I've been able to create at this time. And she doesn't. From day one, I've told her, I'll introduce you to various good men, with a variety of characteristics if you want to go off and spend time with somebody else. She doesn't know of anyone, better than me with all of my faults and inadequacies and whatever to spend her time with. And so her well-being is up, way up, relative to, any other relationship. So she resists the idea of, going off and dating other people. She has to learn very specific things to overcome my hang-ups and my stuff. And they work with me, but they wouldn't work with other men. That was one of the thing that came up, in my relationship exploration, kind of looking for compatibility. I would meet women and I would ask for something and they'd say, well, but other men, all the other men I've dated, they want this. There was one woman in particular who would shut down emotionally and have sex physiologically at the drop of the hat. And she was a perfect performer as kind of a sex mannequin, but she would always dissociate before intercourse. And it drove me nuts. I said, we don't have to have sex, but, I'm here for you. I'm not interested in a performing body. And she's like, well, but every other man loves it and does this, and they want me to be on tap and do this. And I was like, yeah, I get it. But that's not me. And it was too hard for her to rework her strategy for one man, rather than when it was such a good strategy for the people she had been, interacting with so far. And I had to look at her and, you're probably right. You are probably more attractive to more of American men, being able to push on a button like that and perform. That doesn't seem irrational at all based on what you've experienced. But I never want to have sex with you when you're not in your body, and you don't seem to be able to undo that program. So, we separated. But that was a learned program. She didn't feel like being emotionally present for a lot of these men, but, they rewarded her handsomely in ways that were relevant to her survival and security and feeling of praise and love and belonging and all that. And criticism went down and all that because she developed that pattern. So that's basically the model that I work with, that every pattern of energy that is present anywhere has evolved that way in response to a given ecology that rewarded it. And like all traps, the problem is that what was once the best way forward, in another version of reality becomes your biggest enemy, the thing that knocks you over. In this area, you made a joke and everyone laughed and they didn't feel judged. In another area, you make the same joke and people judge you for not being spiritual. You're out of the group, right? And so, it's where you're connecting, and that works. So, I share these thoughts because they're the thoughts that work at this time. They're a map. They're not the best thoughts. They're not the ultimate thoughts. They're just thoughts that work, that they connect well with reality. They produce good results. They produce better results than being anxious about, like, I'm not worried that I'm the source of all negativity because I make self-pity jokes with my dog and my wife laughs and stops doing something annoying. You'd never hear that on the Lazaris techniques, that's the source of marital release and humor and playfulness. Well, you hear it here. That's kind of one of my biggest criticisms of the frailty of the Lazaris community and online forum, is this type of stuff is kept out. Data is kept out, which the only reason to control and dominate people's voice is fear. Fear of being out of control, fear of criticism, fear of thinking, right? That's a very weak position to say we've worked with Lazaris for 50 years and we're afraid of other people speaking and we don't like this and we don't like that. I think that freedom of speech is a valuable thing that the US has. They don't have it in Russia and the Ukraine as of this moment. Well, Putin is still invading the Ukraine. They don't have that. They get arrested for 15 years for protesting a war. You get kicked out of the forum for protesting, among other things, the user agreement. That's very fragile if you cannot allow dissent. But the reality is that everyone who's doing anything found it to work for them at one time. And their ecology, their environment has not facilitated the iteration of a better technique. Meaning, I don't know of a better way of doing it. I know there is one, and I look forward to finding it. And I also know that, if I separate from my wife at some point and connect with someone else, all these techniques that work so well for her will not work with somebody else. And a new set of techniques will work to create flow and value with somebody else. And I know my beliefs don't just suddenly change woman to woman. There are pros and cons, with each set of techniques. There always are. Nothing is perfect. Nothing is terrible. It's on a continuum. And I'll leave you with that.